Sure, Dr. Brown, you're free to go first.
I was about to say, I'll go first.
Well, you were at the top, so.
My name is Angela Brown. I am an instructional leadership director for Shelby County Schools. The primary responsibility in that role is supervising 7 principals in some of the lowest performing schools, which is called the I-Zone. My role is to provide leadership direction, development, and overall support for those leaders.
All right, Ms. Butler.
Hi, my name is Tyria Butler. I'm a SPED advisor with Shelby County Schools. I am responsible for about 10 elementary through high schools. And what we work with is special ed students on compliance, making sure that their rights and all opportunities are being offered to them.
And Ms. Huckabee.
I'm Julia Huckabee. I'm a school psychologist. I'm responsible for all the assessment that we do to identify students with special needs and, reevaluations and working on some program development stuff sometimes. I've got the 2, I think, largest schools in the district. I've got Cordova High School and White Station High School. And then I have 3 alternative schools that don't require quite so much of my time.
All right, thank you guys so much. So Dr. Brown, we'll start with you. So could you tell me where you attended school and possibly if you went to graduate school?
Okay. Yes. Well, let me begin with, I was born in Memphis. However, I grew up in Chicago where I finished high school, and I did attend about 2 years at DePaul University while I was working at the bank. When I relocated to Memphis, the very first place I went was University of Memphis. And now back then it was called Memphis State University. And it is a whole story behind how that all happened, which I'll tell you a little bit more about that a little later. But I came down here hoping to jump into accounting, but something about education pulled me in. So I ended up attending University of Memphis, Memphis State University, to get my bachelor's, my master's, and then my EDS.
Awesome. Ms. Butler, could you tell us a little bit about your story through education? Ms. Butler, I think you're on mute.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was sitting at home one day and I saw this commercial come on TV, and it was about this deaf young kid, and it was saying, "Tommy, can you hear me?" And it really just touched my heart. So I knew I wanted to work with children with disability. So I attended the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, where I majored in elementary education and then general special ed, K through 12. From that point, I relocated a couple of times and I received my master's at St. Mary's University in Minneapolis in curriculum and instruction. And then my postgraduate was in administration, and that was also in Minneapolis.
And Ms. Huckabee, a little bit about your journey.
I did my undergraduate work at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Just wanted to go a long way from home and to a great big school, and sort of stumbled into this psychology class one day. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. I could do that. And so I did. And I got my undergrad degree there. And then I went to Mississippi State and got my master's in clinical. So my background is really a little different. I have a Master of Science in clinical psychology, and I worked in community mental health, state mental institutions, that kind of stuff for a while before I came to work for the school system. But I've been working for the schools now for like 20 years. So, but my background is a little different than most of the school psychologists who typically have like an ed psych degree. So it's different that way.
That's really interesting because I know a lot of the students here today, they kind of see like the normal pathway to become a teacher. And so I was really excited to bring you guys on because you all share different roles that a lot of people may not think about. So I think that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So for you guys, any of you are free to answer. Do you think any of your experiences in college prepared you for your future career aspirations? So any involvement experiences, maybe with a sorority or maybe with your involvement in a club or an association?
Well, can I speak to that first?
Sure.
Please, because I
I
hardly
think one of
remember
the
my undergraduate work.
well, I think the experience that I had.
I think she just went out.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Miss
Experience,
Butler, it's going in and out. You're kind of foggy.
right?
Oh, there
Am I
you
back
go.
with you now?
You're
There you
back.
are.
Okay, I think it was my experience that I had with my internship and my student teaching. I had a wide variety during my internship. I actually was able to go to a institute. So, and I was able to see that environment. When I did my elementary, I was in a very affluent suburb. And then when I did my special ed, I was at a high school that was inner city. So that gave me experience and a look at a different variety of places where I knew that I wanted to work inner city.
And let me just jump in because that, I kind of shared a little bit about how I stumbled into education because in my mind, I wanted to be business administration. I wanted finance. I wanted to be a CPA. That's what I wanted. Well, when I relocated, and I relocated to Memphis because my mom had had a stroke, and she was down here with a little sister who was 3 years old. So here I am. I found my way in Memphis to help my mom, and while I in between jobs, I was helping her, and I decided I'm going to just volunteer at the little elementary school down the street in the off times to give me something to do in between the jobs. And what happened? Well, that particular involvement and that experience was the PTO president. That turned my life upside down when I found out how much I enjoyed being there at that school. So that was one of the experiences that involvement in the school and with the children in a low income area made my life complete. And that's how I ended up in education, because it was just something about that experience. But also, to Ms. Butler's point, the experience that you get through the student teaching in various settings. And lastly, my leadership experience around the mentorship through the University of Memphis Leadership Fellows. So those were some experiences that really shaped my career.
All right, that's amazing. I know having those really influential people in your life can kind of flip your world upside down. I've definitely had some of those. So for any of you guys are also open to answering this, but I guess I'll start with Dr. Brown. Did you have any mentors that assisted you in your leadership development, and like specifically, and did you have any mentors that were women?
Well, actually, yes, I did. As the PTO president at the elementary school, my principal there, the principal at that school at the time was Patricia Garrett. She was a leader that had a vision. She was innovative. I mean, she put it all out there for the children. And she was the person who said to me, you know what? I don't care about this business thing you're talking about. You need to be a teacher. So she convinced me to go back to school. And that's when I went to the University of Memphis to pick up education. So I picked up at that time, you could get a K-8 degree in elementary ed. And after becoming a teacher and the students gravitated to me, everything was working so well. She said, you know what? You need to go in administration. And the interesting thing is the pull on my heart, because I believe it was a ministry for me, the pull on my heart said, you know what? you're not impacting enough students. Just because you have 90 students, that's not enough. Come on, go for it. So then that's how I ended up in administration. So she was a key factor in me moving forward. And then of course, I cannot talk about leadership if I don't mention Reginald Green from the Department of Leadership at the University of Memphis. He is really the father of leadership, and he has influenced a lot of what I am today.
That's amazing. So for you guys, I want to know a little bit about some advice that you may give some of our college students today, or who are trying to develop in their leadership skills. So a lot of the students that you're speaking with today are actually in two separate scholarship programs, both the Emerging Leaders Scholarship Program and the Social Change Scholars Program. So they often focus around volunteering and developing their leadership throughout time, depending on which program they're in. But we also have some other students here that may not work within those types of programs. So I'd like to know a little bit from any of you, kind of what some advice you would give somebody as they move their life in the direction they want when it comes to leadership.
You know, when you sent us those questions, Lucy, I was looking at the mentor question, and I was thinking that my background is different from lots of people because it didn't originally start in education. And I kept thinking mentors, that's more like an education model than a clinical psychology model. And I kept thinking, who really influenced me when I first came to work for the district a million years ago? And all of a sudden it occurred to me, and I thought, well, Barbara Bolton. That Miss Bolton was one of the first people that I met when I came to work for the school system because she worked with the autism program. And I was at White Station Elementary because back then we tracked at elementary, middle, and high school. You know, you stayed with the same feeder schools that way. We've done it a million different ways since then. But having worked outside the system for a while before I came to work for education, I was pretty comfortable in my clinical abilities. But Barbara's the one that taught me how to get things done and how to surround myself with people that think outside the box, I think. Barbara, I remember calling Miss Bolton one time because I have a social skills group for autistic kids at White Station. And we were talking in group one time, and I said to the children something about a field trip. And they had never been anywhere because they can be disruptive and hard to manage in big situations. And I thought, well, why can't they go? You know, so I just picked up the phone and called Miss Bolton. And she was like, you want to take 8 children on the autism spectrum on a field trip? And I said, yeah, sure. Can I do that, please? Can you help me? And Barbara could make that work. And she did. We got a bus, and I had more chaperones than I did kids because it was going to be so much fun. And it was. We went to the Pink Palace, and it was great. But Barbara was independent, fiercely independent, and taught me about reaching for what you think is right for children and standing up for what you believe is the right thing to do for children. And she had a huge heart like that, and I still miss her. Yeah, she's been gone a long time, but she taught me a lot.
I think that's really difficult too, is for our students. A lot of times they come to me and they say, I'm in this difficult situation and I don't know what to do about it, or I'm frustrated. And so I think having those people surround you that are willing to be a voice, willing to help you gain your voice, is really, really important. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
Sure.
And
Now, Lucy, let me add something.
Sure.
Okay, let me add something to that, because in that question you asked about what advice in developing your leadership styles. We've heard about, a lot of times we talk about those people who we want to emulate, who we want to, who set an example for us. But also know that sometimes we do see bad examples, and those are the things we don't want to copy. So always be open to whoever's in leadership to watch what they're doing so you develop who you are.
That's a great point.
And thank you for mentioning that, Mrs. Butler. That's kind of where I wanted to go as well, because you know, often, people see leadership as I want to be in charge, I want to be in charge. But you really have to understand the passion of servitude. If you're not willing to be a server to the people that you serve, then leadership may not be for you. You have to really own the fact that I don't mind serving others, because in a leadership role, you will have to serve the people so that they will understand that you care enough about them to do what's best for them. And then they're willing to follow you. So as you're thinking about leadership, you're thinking about creating groups of people who are willing to follow you. And so you have to have the characteristics, the passion, and the commitment to serving them so that they will in turn serve you.
Absolutely. You make amazing points. So I want to move into a little bit more of our target questions. So these are specifically for our direct panelist. So Ms. Huckabee, I want to ask you first. Can you tell us why you would recommend someone starting a career in education in your specific role?
Well, my specific role, like I said, is as a school psychologist. But I think, I was listening to Dr. Brown talk about that passion that she felt the first time she was involved in a school. And I think as a school psychologist, it's not necessarily that kind of an involved role. A lot of it's just assessment, kind of hit and run. But I've found over the years that there's nothing I would rather do than work with special needs kids and, advocate for them and stand up for them and try to think of ways to help them that may be new and different ways. I mean, we've done some things, your mother and I have done some things at Cordova High School that I'm really proud of. Different ways of thinking about, and those are roles sort of not exactly like a school psychologist. I think that other people in the district, other school psychologists might not necessarily do, but we've worked on program issues and things like that. And it was odd for me because my background, like I said, was clinical. Most people have been in education forever, and I sort of came to the party late, but it's been a really good party, and I really still love it. Love working with special needs kids, and I don't know that I would rather do anything. I can't think of. So even though it's not necessarily in my job description, I've been able over time, I think, to work out ways that I can assist in lots of different fashions, manner of things. And it's really rewarding, or it has been for me.
I'm glad to hear that. So, Ms. Butler, I'll move to you. So, what skills do you think are most necessary for students to acquire in order to be successful within education, and why do you think that?
Tyria, I think you're muted again.
I'm sorry. Can
I
you
missed the
repeat that
best of
again,
us.
Lucy? Because I'm
Sure, absolutely, I can. So, what skills do you think are most necessary for students to acquire in order to be successful in education, and why do you think that?
in education and leadership.
Yeah.
You know what? I would say they definitely need to know their research. They need to professional development. Any time that there are trainings that are offered, I would say be an expert in everything. Have a diverse knowledge base. The skills to work with each other and to network. Create a professional library, and never do your work in isolation. All right, because we can learn from each other and we can share so many of our experiences.
So I would ask to that point as well, with everything going on with the COVID pandemic, you say not to work in isolation. So how have you worked through that period of, most of us working from home or us not being in our typical scenario? So how have you worked through that?
Well, that's one of the questions. That's how technology comes in. We're communicating a lot through Zoom, through Team. Um, when we first started using technology, I mean, we were into Word, we were into Microsoft, we were, just pretty much typing documents. Now you got to be able to do spreadsheets. You have to have that for documentation. You have to be able to do presentations. You will even have to do presentation role in a 15-minute presentation. That also works being able to use that technology with your students, being able to train your teachers to address the different learning styles and modalities that students have. When you're in leadership, you're not just working with students, you're working with your principals, you're working with teachers. So you have to use that for your professional development as well as your curriculum. And there's got so many different programs out here that we use with our students. So just being up on research, professional development, and knowing your technology.
Absolutely. Being technologically sound is a huge part of our world right now. I know that this semester and really last semester, I just really learned how to do breakout rooms the other day. And I felt so behind the times because I was asking students, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me. I'm very confused. So, I mean, even only being 22 years old, I still feel like there's a lot for me to learn from these younger students who are 18, 19, who are on the computer all the time doing their school. So that's really interesting, how you still stay connected to your team and stay connected to your professional development. So I'll go to Dr. Brown. So with being in administration, you have a lot of different roles that you're doing all the time. So we'd like to know, how do you effectively manage large projects and delegate tasks?
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say one thing to Ms. Huckabee. I'm sorry that you didn't get a chance to come to any of the schools that I led, because if you had, you would have had so much fun, because my exceptional children, you couldn't tell the difference. I don't care where you were. Ms. Butler can probably testify for that.
We would have a really good time.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. They had to attend dances. They went to field. They did everything. I'm telling you, trust me when I say. Okay, but I'm sorry. Lucy, I had to get off on that because I told her she really missed it. She missed it if she didn't get a chance to work at any of the schools.
I did miss it. I wasn't there for that. That was when they were little bitties. We were in high school by this time.
So what I want to say is, to begin, keep in mind, I started out as a teacher and then an assistant principal and a principal. So you collect things along the way. Before I became an instructional leadership director, the first thing I had to do is you had to develop relationships. Relationships is the key to being able to manage any type of project. If you don't have good relationships with the people that you serve, because the one thing about it, when people trust you, when you operate with integrity and you treat everyone with dignity and respect, they will go to the end for you. And they will work as hard and as long as you need to get the job done. So when you think about how do you effectively manage those projects, you have to be really strategic about the vision of what you're trying to accomplish first. So you create the vision, because you know what happens if there's no vision. We're all over the place. So you create the vision and then put the key people in place. Who are the key people that will help you accomplish this goal? And then you outline your task and put your timelines to them. And of course, there always has to be a monitoring of effectiveness system in place. How am I doing on this? Someone keeping you in check. So you have to always have a group of people working collaboratively with you to accomplish any task. But you must start with the vision and identify the priorities and make sure the right team is in place. That's pretty much the key to being able to manage a large project, and how you delegate the task. And you delegate it you've heard Jim Collins talk about having the right people on the bus. and then having them in the right seat. Because sometimes you'll have people doing things that's not their area. But as a leader, you have to have monitoring systems in place to quickly identify, redirect, reseat, and then get the work done.
Absolutely. And with that, I think it's really interesting because we talk about treating people with dignity and respect. So I think it does get difficult sometimes when there are hard conversations that have to come up when you do have to move people from roles that maybe they think that they're doing great in, and you have to move them somewhere else because it's just not their territory. So with that, I want to ask you, how do you stay professional and how do you go about, you know, those conversations, when those difficult conversations, how do you stay professional in those moments?
Well, it's not difficult to stay professional in those moments when you have clearly articulated the expectations and the guidelines. Once you have clearly articulated and communicated the expectations to the point where everyone understands what's expected, then it's not difficult to have a difficult conversation with those people. I'm one of those leaders that people will come and say to me, you know what, you're right. I did this, this, and that. And they'll kind of pretty much come up with their own punishment because they can, because everything is laid out. I'm not one I'm always one of those people that if you missed it, maybe it was something that I could have done differently. So let's figure out how we can work together to help this be a win-win. Because I'm not out to be punitive in every situation, but there are times if you're not following the protocols that have been laid out, that you clearly articulated, that you understood, then let's talk about what happened, how can we avoid it, and how are we going to move forward. Those are the three ways that you just kind of have those conversations. But when you clearly articulate what the expectations are, you rarely do you have people who will push against, well, I did do this, this, and this. No, it says you have to have this. And if this looks right, it'll have this, this, and this, right? So it's really about being clear in your communication.
We talk about those clear and concise guidelines all the time with students about, this is my expectation for you. If those expectations are met, like, this is what's going to happen. And it's very well known from day one. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. So Miss Butler, I want to go to you. So for someone going into education, I know that it can be in any career as well. It can be very nerve-wracking when you first graduate college and you're first dipping your toes in the water and you're starting a career. So I want to know a little bit about what you think students can do to lead early on in their career.
Well, you know, when you're looking at leadership, you can look at it from the point when you first walk in a classroom. You are a leader to your students. You are a leader to your teaching assistants. You can use peer coaching, you know, with your teachers. And as I said before, professional development, anything that is offered, always take that. All right. There are going to be committees. When I worked in a school with Dr. Brown, I did work with Dr. Brown. There was a sign-up committee, and you had to sign up for at least 3 committees every period. So you have opportunities to have leadership. When it comes to presenting, just sharing information. And when you show that, when you go into a building and you can show that leadership quality to an administrator, I've never known an administrator to hold someone down. All right. We go back and we lift the next person up. And so when opportunities become available, you've created your resume, you've shown the professional development you've had, you've shown the workshops that you've been a part of. And that puts you in a situation where you have the knowledge base now and you're comfortable. Because one thing in leadership, you have to have confidence in yourself. I can't get up in front of you and lead you if I'm insecure, because people will challenge you. They will ask you questions. And if you become defensive, then that lets them know you're not showing that leadership. I have always allowed staff for anything that I've ever required or any directive, they've always been allowed to come and ask me, why are we doing this? What is the rationalization? It never intimidated me because I knew what I was doing. So as a leader, you have to have that confidence. You have to show it, and you have to have the knowledge. And as Dr. Brown said, that relationship building, you develop a relationship, a person will swim across the Mississippi River for you. Okay.
You know, I think another important thing to remember about leadership is it's okay to not know something. You're much better off acknowledging that you don't know something and you'll go find it out than, like Miss Butler said, getting defensive and pretending like you know it. And when you're really young, sometimes you want to do that. But the most admiration I've had for people that I've worked under and that have I felt been leaders to me was their ability to own that and just go, you know, that didn't work. It's okay to do that. It's okay to say something didn't work. We'll go back and try to find another way. You know, but I think that's a good quality in leaders too, is to acknowledge that people want to follow you when they know that you are infallible, just like the rest of us. It's that thing that Dr. Brown was saying about working side by side with some people. It's not, you know, over everybody. We're all doing this together.
We talk about teamwork a lot within our SOPCs with students. We talk about the self-awareness aspect that, Miss Butler spoke about, and, having that confidence about you, but also not being overly confident. So being somebody that, students or, staff members can be approachable, because you don't want to be somebody that's not approachable. So we speak a lot about that. So I appreciate you guys bringing that up. So Ms. Huckabee, I want to ask you, so we've spoken a lot about your roles and the way that people step up within their roles. So I want to know a little bit about how you moved into the leadership position that you are in your school district.
It's funny that you say that. I asked a teacher at Cordova this morning. I said, okay, you're just going to have to look at this leadership question because I don't feel like I'm in any kind of leadership role. Yeah, I'm just a school psychologist working at my schools. And he said, you're not thinking about this the right way. He said, look at what you've done here at Cordova in terms of going back and looking at children coming into high schools and the needs that we have and the expectations we have in high school, that if we're not planning for that early on, then the wheels can just all come off the bus when you walk into the ninth grade. And now all of a sudden we're playing for all the marbles and their Carnegie units and credits and everything counts. And we've tried to raise awareness about expectations and develop some programs. And I had never really thought of that as a leadership thing. It was just my job. You know, I was just trying to do what we thought was right and best for these children. And I guess partly because I've been around a really long time and I'm not always up on all the buzzwords. But he was like, that's leadership, Julia. That's seeing a need and doing and surrounding yourself with some people that can help you try to fix that thing. So, you know, I guess that's my leadership role. I don't think about it like Dr. Brown, you know, over, you know, a big over a lot of people. But then, like you said, Dr. Brown, it's not over people, it's working with them. So I just didn't really look at it that way, I guess. So it's just, you know, mostly me and Miss Orr's mother running around trying to get stuff done.
You absolutely are a leader, I'll tell you that. And
I
a great one
just
at
not
that.
think about it like that. I mean, leaders to me are like, you know, principals and ILDs and people like that.
But it couldn't happen without you.
I would just go to work and do my thing.
Okay, so this is a question for the panel, just all of you, so you're welcome to answer. So if you're comfortable, I'd like to know about something that you consider to be your biggest leadership victory and something that you feel like you would change, or something now that you look back on and you think could have been better.
Well, go ahead, Butler. You can go first.
Okay, what I would say, and and I have reflected on this, and I know we're in leadership and I know we're in education. For me, any failure is any time a student does not succeed. All right. I based everything in this job on students being successful. So for me, if I have a student that drop out, or I have a student that being in alternative school who was arrested, but anytime there was a failure for a student, that's a failure for me. Greatest accomplishment can be as simple as a child finally getting that number one or that number three after you work with them for a year on that. So my success and failures are always going to wrap around the students. Anytime we have a teacher that is frustrated and wants to resign, it's anytime there's something negative that takes away from our students being successful.
So for me, I think one of the greatest successes that I have to reflect on is my first principalship in 2004. I was assigned my very first school after coming out of my leadership program, and I'm ready to be a principal. And this is my first assignment. I was assigned a school that was on the high priority list, and the school didn't know that they were on the list. I was the 5th principal in 7 years. So here we are. This new little thing, who does she think she is? Getting ready to tell us we've been doing this work a long time, and we've been successful. But at this point, here I was charged with this role. So I call that my success, because here we had reading scores and math scores in like below 20%, 10, 15. Reading was 8, and I think math was 10 at the time in 2004. Within 3 years, we won Tennessee Growth Award that the state gave out. And then within 5 years, we had earned the National Blue Ribbon Award, where we went to Washington, D.C., recognized for being one of the only Title I schools at that time, Memphis City schools, who had ever won that award on a national level, where now our scores are 89 in reading and 93 in math. And that was the first time something like that had ever happened in our district for a Title I school. So that was one of my biggest accomplishments. But when I think about, and so after being at that school, they moved me to have me open up one of the largest middle schools outside of White Station, was Cape Bond Middle School. So I opened Cape Bond Middle School. And this was a school that had 1,250 middle school students coming from 5 feeder schools. And so that task was to bring them all together and form this new school. And so we led the district with being models and everything. But the one thing I would have done differently is because now keep in mind, the children loved coming to school, they enjoyed their new school, but I really wanted an opportunity to stay. I would have stayed there a little bit longer, because I needed for every one of those students who came in as 6th graders, I wanted to stay at the school until they became 12th graders, because it was very important to me what their outcome was at the end of the 12th grade year. And you probably saw a lot of those at Cordova once they got there. And it was you could probably tell the difference between the children that came up with me versus the ones that were either before me from those other schools, or the ones that after I left. It's a total
I remember that.
I know you do. I know
Because
you
I've
do.
been here at Cordova High School for 13 years now.
And I'm telling you, my kids left me with a drive that they were going to make it. And I just wanted to be there when they finished in 12. So I did hear from a whole lot of them after that. But that was the one thing I would do differently. I probably would have stayed. But of course, me.
I kind of wish you had.
Thank you. And the drive that I had is, how can I impact more? Because I figured I couldn't impact more in 1350. That was a lot. So, but then when this role came about, and it's like, okay, how do you change and how do you impact more? And so that's what made me change. But that's the one thing I probably would do differently.
I have a whole bunch of students in the chat telling you how amazing you are and how awesome that is. I do have one student that wants to ask, let's see, they said, would like to know what that looked like. What was the strategy to build those numbers up? And for you, like, how did you start and what was the strategy going through?
Just give me some clarity. You starting what, the middle school?
Yes.
I think the rating, I thought it was the rating program.
Well, it could be anything. So it could be either program that you built
Okay.
success through. Yeah.
Okay, so and I'll go ahead and call the school because it's public knowledge anyway. It's the first school was Douglas. It was Douglas Elementary School. That was the school that was at a high priority school. And my motto going in, because I looked at the data, because the first thing you got to do is you got to know the truth. You have to know the truth, because remember, I said the staff didn't know that they were a high priority school. They didn't know that they were on the list. They didn't know. So it's important to know your truth. So the first thing you have to do is present the data. Let the data do the talking for you. And then you come up with your strategy. Again, remember, I talked about having the vision on what you need. The vision was from at risk to off the list. That was our slogan for that work, from at risk to off the list. And I'm gonna tell you something. Because Douglas is a community that has a lot of pride, it was easy for me to get them on board, because that's another whole seminar if I tell you about that journey. But I just want you to know it's about having a vision. Let the data lead you. Once you've looked at that vision, then you get your teams together and you start helping them to chip away at it. So it took us 3 years to start the scores to moving up, but 5 years is what the National Blue Ribbon Award requires. You had to have increases for 5 consecutive years, and that's what we had. And I left there the 6th year once the school was on top. And then as far as Cape Bond, remember, they rezoned that area. So I didn't have a choice on who was coming. All I know is they were coming, and
In droves.
yeah, they were. And then once they saw how I treated our exceptional children department, and once they saw how I treated our ELL students, and once they saw how we treated all of our demographics, they were like, oh, they came from everywhere, and they kept coming, and they kept coming. And so
Yes,
that school, that school that was built for 1,000 now had 13. So it was that work. And we were competing with White Station, and this was not an optional school. And so the slogan there was, we're not an optional school, we're just your best option. So that's what I said to them. So it's the motivation, it's the belief that you can do it, it's the strategy and the structures that have to be in place to make success happen in any situation.
Dr. Brown, what year were you the principal of the year?
Of where? At Cape Bond?
Yes.
I went to Cape Bond in 2010, I think. No, had to be 2011.
Weren't you selected?
Yes.
Weren't you selected or acknowledged? Yeah. You share that?
I've been selected for a few things. But Butler, tell me more. Say more.
In your principal capacity at Cape Bond, weren't you acknowledged?
Yeah, I actually that year, 2012, I think I won Principal of the Year for Shelby County Schools. At that point, we had become Shelby County Schools, and I was awarded in Nashville from the Department of Education. Yeah.
That's amazing. And for Miss Huckabee, is there any great success that you want to talk about, or maybe something that you wish would have been done better in your career?
I think the thing I'm most proud of is establishing a long-term social skills group at White Station High School with my speech pathologist. We've been doing that group now for about 8 years, and it's for children on the autism spectrum. And typically they start when they're freshmen. And this goes back to what Dr. Brown said, and they stay in the group until they graduate. So we have them the whole time. And it is the change that we see in them over those 4 years is probably the most rewarding thing that I do. They come in sort of awkward and with all those kind of spectrumy things. And a few years ago, I had a student peer mentor, absolutely stunning girl. And two of my guys that were graduating wanted to go to the prom, and she wasn't going to go, but she decided to go with them. And so both of the guys got a date with Hannah to the prom with like the best looking girl in the senior class. And it was just amazing. And kids still come back to group. I mean, they'll come visit the group sometimes after they've graduated. Um, Probably the thing, a lot like Miss Butler, the things that are my failures are the kids that I don't get, that something happens to them and I feel like I wasn't able to intervene or I wasn't able to help. And I'll go a long way out of my way to try. And sometimes you just miss it, you know, or they won't let you. Some children just won't let you help them. And I have a hard time with that. That I struggle a lot with that when I can't reach somebody.
I can definitely
So
see how that would be hard.
yeah, when you try real hard like we do, and sometimes when you can't reach one or it slips through your fingers,
It's
and
devastating.
those are hard.
So we have about 5 minutes left with our panelists. So any students that have any questions who haven't already dropped them down in the chat, please go ahead and drop those. If you have a specific question for somebody or for a panelist, please type that in your message so I'll know who to direct it to. But if it's just for the whole group and whoever you want to answer, you can just type that. I do have a question for Dr. Brown. It says, how do you balance going to the schools and making sure everything is in check?
Um, so, so I saw that question, but I want to answer this one first because I think it got lost in the shuffle. And it was about how long from being a teacher to administrator. I was a teacher for 7 years. And then from there, I was an assistant principal for 3 years and then a principal for 14 years. So that's pretty much what that time frame looks like. Now, balancing from in the role that I am now, because keep in mind, I do have 7 schools and in each school is its own separate entity. So it's very important to, first of all, you have to have this calendar book. You have to keep a calendar. You gotta keep track of what all you're doing. But it's important to let the data drive your work because each school has its own set of data. And it's from that priorities are set based on the needs of the school and the needs of the leader. So Ms. Butler talked about different professional developments and things like that. So very similar to what a principal would do for teachers. You have to know what your teachers need. You have to know where those gaps are. And so you develop a differentiated PD plan for the leaders. So balancing it is, and most of the time, depending on where you are, because keep in mind, I lead the lowest schools in the entire state for our district, which are I-zone schools. So the bottom line is our priorities is student achievement. Our priorities are student growth. So there are certain practices that no matter where you are, that's going to be something you have to work on. But then you got to dig into the professional themselves. Like, what do you see are their leadership gaps? So most of the time, I always try to do some type of analysis where it kind of helps me learn a little bit more about them. But keep in mind, this is my second set of schools. My first set of schools, I had 7, and all of them moved out of the bottom 5%, except 2. And the leaders had to be replaced. So now I have a whole new set. So this same work works as long as you understand that you have your data, you create individual profiles on who are these people, what are the needs, and you keep track of. So I have a running document that clearly articulates what particular priorities I'm going to work on, what strategies I'm going to use to work on that, and then my monitoring tool. So the same thing that I did as a school leader is how I lead the same work, and that's how I manage it all. I hope that answered your question.
Lucy, I think
I
you're
just
muted.
realized I was on mute. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm telling you, I do not know how to do Zoom yet. So I think this is a question for Dr. Brown, but I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is. A student asking kind of what is your stand on the new reading program that's being proposed for Shelby County?
Well, okay, first of all, I'm wondering, are you talking about my perspectives, wonders, or are you referencing the instructional practices from Epiphany?
Celeste, tell me, what do you think? What do you
Epiphany.
want to know?
About
Okay.
Epiphany.
You said, what's my stance? Well, let me say this. The 4 instructional practices that are being called out are not technically new practices. We've always had to, if we think about our teacher evaluation system, it's grounded in teaching practices and strategies to get it done. And that Teach One talks about an objective-driven lesson. So we've always had that. We always had a standard that should be driving our lesson. So this practice is not new. It's requiring a lot of other stuff to happen. But if we truly look at what our Teach One objective-driven lesson calls out, it lives there, seriously. And then when you think about vocabulary, well, Marzano did a whole list of research on how to effectively use vocabulary. So all I'm saying to you is that those 4 instructional practices have always been around. They've always been a part. And as a leader, that's what we need to drive. So what my stance is that we have everything we need. We already have everything we need. And that's always been my stance. When we add new things and we change things, and we have everything we need. Now, I'm not sure what else we need to purchase to go along with our new curriculum, but I think we have everything we need.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you all for coming today and speaking with us. That's about our time. So thank you, Dr. Brown, Ms. Huckabee, and Ms. Butler. And we so appreciate your input, and we so appreciate you speaking about your role within education and the way that your leadership has developed over time. So if you guys could stick around with me for just a few more minutes, that would be great. But students, if you have any questions or concerns or anything like that, for me, you all have my email, or those of you who are not within my scholarship programs that I oversee, go on Tiger Zone and my information should be on there. Or you can type it down in the chat if you really need it on here. But I will see you all later.